record button. So we're getting started. So welcome everyone. We have everyone else here is familiar with the practice, Iman. So I'll just we'll give just a short little introduction. So I'm Edwin Rutsch. I'm the director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and for about 14 years, I've been working on how to build a more empathic society. Oh, great! We have Rosa joining us. She's also familiar with the practice. And so what this cafe is how do we build an empathy movement? Hey, Rosa. And the purpose is to use the empathy circle practice to talk about how do we build an empathy movement. And we'll just get started. What we'll do, kind of the outline, is we'll go through, we'll have short participant introductions. I'll show some of the projects we're working on. Then we'll go into an empathy circle to discuss. And then we'll have to discuss our topic of how to build an empathy movement. And then we'll have a little debrief at the end. So to begin with, maybe we can just start with sharing. Let me put it in here into the chat. Our name, location, and why you're interested in attending. And I'll just model that. I'm Edwin Rutch, and I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I think that we need empathy as a primary social value. That's empathy and mutual listening. And that's what I'm really trying to do is spread that message and really kind of make that happen. So Larry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Larry in Florida, and I'm a retired occupational therapist. And I found Edwin's empathy circles on YouTube about a year ago, and just fell in love with this process, the simplicity and the effectiveness. And I just love to participate in it. I think that's what the world needs now is empathy, sweet empathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Graham?
Thanks, Edwin. My name's Graham, and as you can see from my name there, I'm from Canada, just by Detroit, opposite from Detroit. And I first joined Edwin's Empathy Circles, I think it was November 2020, actually about November 27th, 2020. And I've actually never looked back. And the really important bit for me is the listening skill components. Yeah, I'm now taking it on a bit further. There is actually a lot to learn about listening. There's a lot of skill that can be acquired in terms of listening. But some of the objectives for me are creating a psychologically safe environment. And indeed, you have to use listening and empathy skills to actually generate that. And so that's my interest. That's who I am. That's where I come from. And I look forward to today's session. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Hey, Rosa, do you want to go?
Sure. I don't remember when I first connected with you, Edwin, and when I got introduced to empathy circles, but I got reconnected recently when you sent out the invitation with regard to the work with police and communities. And you've been plugging away at this for a long time, and I'm just really glad to see how much it's spread. I use empathy circles in my own practice. And I had a lovely conversation with Valerie recently about different approaches to modify empathy circles slightly for other purposes. And I also recently got a invitation to connect on LinkedIn from Lita Vish, who I've never met personally or anything, but I was just delighted to see what she and her partner are doing with, I think they're calling it I don't know. I'm sorry. My memory is really bad. Integrated
Intravision.
intravision. Right. And I'm delighted because I'm in the middle of writing a dissertation right now, and I've seen firsthand how in the academic realm, especially in the field of deliberative democracy and political science, their definition of empathy is so narrow and so unhelpful and so not relational. And so I feel like if we all work together, that's part of what I think is going to help us create a movement. So.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here is work on creating that that movement. So great, thanks, Rosa. Bill?
Yeah, well, I'm a retired special education teacher, and I worked for almost 4 decades with families and kids in crisis, extreme crisis. And so in my job, I was not introduced to the empathy circles at that time. I wish I were, but I certainly used empathic listening a great deal, and I could see how effective it was. And so I've been working with Edwin after I retired for about 5 years now, in helping to design the training, not the empathy circle, but the training. And you know, I've been really excited to see its effects and you know, and to reinforce what everyone else has said about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Valerie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie. I'm from New Westminster in Columbia, and I'm interested in empathy because I believe that we need a physiological how to do things on the planet, because humans affect the entire planet. And if we weren't look at ourselves, then I think empathy is the best way to do that. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Iman?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Iman, and I'm from Egypt. And actually, I find this session so interesting so far, and I'm really excited to be part of the session. I've been working as a teaching faculty member and academic researcher for almost 10 years now. I've completed my master's degree in TEFL, which is teaching for English for foreign language. And now I'm in the final phase of my PhD. And I really all the time feel that I'm that people person who likes to connect and communicate with others. And that's what I was always doing with my students, my managers, and my colleagues. Because I've always had this belief in mind that behind every one of us, there is a story to be told, and this story needs an active listeners who really like opens his mind and his heart and is willing to see things differently. And I feel that every one of us really need empathy, especially now the world is getting more and more complicated. And as a person who's really thinking of like pivoting to a new career and a new industry which is UX research, I find that empathy is more and more needed, and it should be one of my skill sets. So I needed like to polish it and to practice it with you here. And I'm really happy that I'm part of the session so far. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's see, I think Valerie's having trouble connecting. Your connection, I think, is a little unstable. If you leave your video off, it might give you, oh, there she goes again. She's coming in and out. So yeah, it looks like Valerie, you're having some connection problems. You're welcome to keep the video off if you think that helps, because maybe it's a bandwidth issue or whatever. Okay, so the next, just quickly, I wanted to go through and just share. We have all kinds of, the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy has a lot of different projects that we do, and we've been, I don't know, Adrian, we'll let one person in. And then we have a lot of different projects, and one of them is the facilitation training. I just put the links in. This is for everybody that is familiar with it, I guess. E-Man, Sally. Now everybody comes a little bit late. So, okay. We'll have to lock the room shortly because.
Okay.
So anyway, let me just give a quick share. So there's two major projects we have. One is the empathy facilitation training, and the other is my campaign for Congress, trying to promote empathy. So let me give a quick share for this, and those are the links. If you go to bestempathytraining.com, there's the whole information there about how to sign up for the training. There's a video about the website. It's almost 20 minutes. That gives you the real in-depth, and you can click on the side, and there's a lot of links there within the site. But if you just scroll down, it gives you the information about the training. It's by donation. The prerequisite is that you take at least 2 empathy circles, and this counts as today as one. So if you take part today, take part in another one, and then you've met the prerequisites for taking the training. And this trains you to be an empathy circle facilitator. And it's 5 weeks, and you just go to the site and it'll give you all the details. A training just started a couple weeks ago, so it'll be a couple of months before we start the next cohort. But anyway, you can get kind of prepared for that and see the site. Another project we have is Edwin for Congress. I'm running for Congress here in the San Francisco Bay Area as leading the empathy movement and the empathy candidate. So we're in this call today, we're talking about how do we build an empathy movement. And the campaign is to promote the empathy in politics, and I'm really making the case that talking about the importance of empathy in the campaign. So you can kind of scroll down, kind of check that out, and there's just all kinds of information about this is the congressional district, etc. You can there's information about me at the top. You can volunteer, and it's just I think, what is it? It's only like 3 weeks until the primary election. So we'll see. The top 2 vote getters, they go on to the general election, which is November 5th or something. So that's the let's see. That's a little bit of an intro there. What do we have here? Just checking. Hey, Sally, you're familiar with everything here. Adrian, just if you could check in. Are you familiar with the empathy circle practice? You could just maybe introduce yourself real quick, just name and location. You're muted, Adrian. Okay, looks like not able to connect, or okay, well hopefully you'll just be able to observe. Maybe your audio, you'll be able to connect with us in a little bit. So here is our topic for today, and it'll be 4-minute turns. Is there someone that can keep time? Larry, great. So let me put that in. We'll stay in one group, I think. So our topic is, how might we build the empathy movement, or whatever is alive for you? And in this process, we're going to have 4-minute turns. So one person will be the speaker. They will select who they listen to, who they speak to. You'll speak, share a little bit, an idea or two, pause, get a reflection. Your listener will reflect back what they heard you say. What they understand, so the essence of what you said, you check, did they understand it or not? If they didn't understand it, you say it again. If they did understand it, you continue, and then, speak for, share another idea or two, pause, get another reflection. When the time is up, 4 minutes, Larry will hold up his phone that says time on it. And at that point, the listener becomes the speaker, and they select a listener, and we just keep going around for the time allotted. We have about an hour and 20 minutes for that. And I'm going to post a a link here to a Google Doc. And you can take notes here. If you're the silent listener, you can take notes in this document about what you heard or just any ideas. So we do want to get better at harvesting the insights generated in these empathy circles. So I think with that, we can just jump right into it. Since we'll maybe, Eman, we'll speak to you more towards the end so that you can just observe the process for a little while, and Adrian as well. So who wants to start and select your listener? And let's take it away. Again, our question is how can we build an empathy movement or whatever's alive for you? Go, yeah. Who do you want to speak to?
Okay. Larry, would you please be my listener? Thank you. Okay. So just before we started the meeting, Larry was saying something very interesting about, and I can't remember exactly what it was because I was sort of running around, but it was something about changing. It's time to change our inner, sort of the way that we do things, something like that. But the reason why it resonated with me is because I was thinking something very much along these lines, which is how we're sort of cultured and the construct of that. And then it's almost like we don't allow there to be a change towards something that is more vulnerable and delicate and essential, because we're so wired to protect ourselves. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Valerie. So I'm hearing you're sharing some ideas of how with culture over a period of time, human beings have been kind of shaped into something that has a defense system that protects itself. And that outer armor is protecting something that within is very vulnerable and delicate. It's the essence of who we really are. But we've confused the armor that culture has taught us to use with who we are. Now, I'm totally changing what you said, and I'm trying to follow the essence of what you said. Let me know if getting close.
No, that is exactly it. And I think that you sort of helped to express the part that really got to me, but I couldn't remember the words. And so we often, at least for me, I've experienced being in situations where you will bring light into the room or you will bring light into a conversation, and the other person or people are just driving the same train that they've always been driving. And it's almost like you come in as something that's discombobulating the status quo. And it's just really interesting for me because at our core, what we're all looking for is that heartfelt connection, to be heard, to be listened to really have an experience on a sort of very quiet and subtle level where we can actually feel alive. And yet we just like cut that off so abrasively and make so many justifications for why we do this. And I think that although on one level I can understand how it's been happening generation after generation, I think it's an obstacle that we need to talk about in terms of building an empathy of, building a community of empathy, because this is part of the major obstacle, I think.
So Valerie, I'm hearing that this kind of strong suit of armor that most people wear to protect themselves in the world, when someone comes in with a kind of a light unarmored, unprotected, vulnerable presence. It's like that light is not permitted to shine in essence. That light is suppressed in someone who's just being alive and human in a world of, I'm having a vision of crabs with very strong crab legs, bony, ready to protect and defend and fight. And yet there's a vulnerable energy, essence within everyone. That is the aliveness. That is what we all want to come and share and celebrate life. We're here, we're alive. Let's sing and dance and enjoy life. Something like that.
Thank you, Larry. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Bill, will you be my listener?
Happily, Larry.
Thank you, Bill. Well, let's restart the timer. I have to remember the world, time clocks in the world. Yeah, it was beautiful what Valerie's sharing. I totally align with that. And it does appear that for a long time, culture has been, or society or civilization, I guess you'd say, has been at war a long time.
So you're resonating with what Valerie said, and you very much agree with it. And in Distilled, you said that, in culture, we have a long experience and we're conditioned to conflict and war.
Yeah, to fight and survive, and survival of the fittest, and to the victor go all the spoils of war. That kind of history has gone on for a long, long time. So to break out of that, to build a culture of empathy is the challenge, I would say.
So you're talking about the long historical conditioning, of essentially the examples you give are like a zero-sum game. To the victor belong the spoils, and the losers have no spoils. So you're saying, so that's a long-standing conditioning, and then to change that to a more empathic society is you're swimming upstream, essentially, because of all the long history.
Yeah, and I think there's a temptation, so to speak, that we might want to tell other people to do that. We might want to tell other people they should be more empathic. So that Gandhi quote, I'll stop there.
Sure. So you're talking about the very, human nature. Whenever we want to affect change, it should start with other people who are doing who are all wrong. And so I think you're about to turn the tables there.
Yeah, it's like, if all those other people would be the way I want them to be in my domination thought system, then I'd be happy.
Right. So a lot of times when people are dissatisfied with the world and they want to change it, they want people to basically fit the kind of structure that they see in their minds, the way they would want to be where the world to be.
And that's kind of the paradox of it, the whole thing. It obviously starts within each of us, and we can't really teach something we're not willing to demonstrate ourselves. So for me, how to effectively bring about a cultural shift is to begin at home.
Yeah, so you wanted to, you set that up to make the point that, directly trying to, tell people what to do is just another manifestation of what you mentioned as the dominance hierarchy. And that if you really want to change people, you have to change yourself and let other people observe it and then adopt it because they feel that it's a better way of being.
Yeah, and that's another paradox. It's not really changing yourself. It's unchanging yourself to be back to your natural empathic self before the domination thought system put on a suit of armor to go to war, to undo the armor, to reveal, to be vulnerable in the empathic, peaceful self.
So you wanted to, yeah, make a correction in perception in that you're not changing yourself to create something completely new, but actually to rediscover your natural human nature.
Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard.
My pleasure. Okay. All right. Graham.
Yes, great idea. Thank you, Bill.
So yeah, I agree with both what Valerie said and then Larry said. And I remember in my job, our students were really in crisis, violent, all sorts of problems. And we had them for 6.5 hours a day. And so that means that they, the other, 17.5 hours they were home. And still under the influence of, dysfunctional influences. But I was amazed how they kind of reached for the healthy. I'll stop there.
You reflected on Larry and Valerie's sharing, and you kind of resonate with where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And this takes you to think about the children who are in your classes, in your special ed classes. They were surrounded in crisis and surrounded by crisis. And you would have them only for 6.5 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
but their family would have them for the remainder. And they would be kind of reestablishing all the dysfunctionality that you've kind of been trying to deal with the 6.5 hours. But what you did notice was that these children gravitate towards, now I'm not sure what I heard, but they gravitate towards the peace, the stability and healthy communications.
Yeah. And in other words, what I began to sense, at least anecdotally for myself, was that, exposure to functional ways of being had a powerful attraction for them. I'll stop there.
And though you describe it as anecdotal, it's all from your experience that these children have an innate sense for what is an appropriate way to behave, an effective and a functionally effective way to behave and to communicate.
Yeah. And so the question then came up was, so then why is there so much anger and hate and vitriol in the world? And how does that square with my experience? So I came to the conclusion, very much as Larry and Valerie have, that it wasn't that people are innately violent and dysfunctional. It's that we're innately community building and functional. And that is a deep knowing we have. And when it doesn't occur, especially with children and people who can't negotiate that, then they act out. So they're acting out because somewhere deep down they know, as Larry talked about, there's a better way of being, and they're not seeing it. And that, from there, hate and violence arise. Sorry, that was pretty, circuitous there, Graham. You're doing a great job. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. You try to deal with this, whatever it is, a split or contradiction, where you sense that we all have, including those children you taught, an innate desire to connect and to community build and create relationships. Yet, seemingly, everything seems to degenerate into violence and things of that ilk. And your deduction is that while they're aiming for this kind of productive connection with people, it all gets brought to nothing. In other words, it's frustrated, it's stopped, it's interfered with, and as a result, these children react and they play out. And what you're seeing is that they're reacting negatively to the constraints put on them.
Thanks. Yeah, that's my time. I feel fully heard. Thank you, Graham. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Rosa, would you be so kind and be my listener?
Yes, with pleasure.
Thank you, Rosa.
And hold on a sec, I'm going to get back on video.
Okay. Just in passing, I can't help myself here. I'm thinking about Iman, and I didn't pick Iman because I'm thinking she would benefit by watching what we're doing, and then we'd end up picking her.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Graham, for giving me the chance, like, to follow up with the session and what's going on.
thank you, Iman.
Great.
So anyway, Rosa, I'm happy about the way in which Sally and it was perhaps Valerie and Larry started this conversation, and that is essentially that we have in this whole process of promoting an empathy movement, we need to be true to ourselves, and we need to be able to role model the process, and indeed be confident about it. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you're glad about how the conversation started in this whole sense of the importance of role modeling empathy as best we can. And both Larry and Valerie spoke to that.
And so when I saw this the topic, like how might we build the empathy movement, I thought, oh dear, I can't do that. But I come back to this thing that I need to start with myself. I can't demand things of other people. I can't sell ideas to other people unless I can actually do it effectively myself.
So you feel like when you first thought about the topic of this, it felt difficult to build an empathy movement. But then with this particular direction that the conversation has been taking, it feels more doable to focus on your own development as a role model of empathy. Is that close?
Absolutely, absolutely. And within that kind of personal skill development, there's not only the whole listening and empathic process, but there's also allied things, like, for example, being able to respond effectively to people who are, using words, some of Bill's words, acting out, or being driven by their insecurities, or so there's all sorts of negativity there. It may be different, there'll be different types of negativity, but there's all sorts of blowback, there's all sorts of negativity, and I need to learn to be able to cope with all of those peripheral aspects before I can move on.
Yeah, so you're talking about how listening and giving an empathic response in the empathic process is part of what we need. And then kind of when we're taking this on the road, as it were, there are situations where people will be acting out or acting out or communicating some kind of negativity in some way, and that being able to deal skillfully with that is another skill that you see as important for you to develop.
Yes, absolutely. And I just give you one very brief example, or at least I'll try to be brief. I have a friend who calls me up by phone, and he is really very overwhelming. He talks and he doesn't allow any space for me to talk. He talks at me, and I've tried to respond and influence his behavior, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, so this is an example of needing additional skills, not just reflecting, and you're offering the example of a friend who calls you and talks at you, and it's been challenging to respond in a constructive way.
Yes, and as a process of trying to get us both into a comfortable space where we can both enjoy each other, I've asked him to pause and allow me some space to talk, and I've tried to reflect. And the bottom line is that he now doesn't talk to me.
Yeah, so you had this intention of creating a situation where you would both enjoy the
Thank you,
conversation. And that was your intention, to create a situation where you both enjoyed the conversation. And so for the purpose of that, you asked your friend to pause so that you could have a chance to reflect and also share. And he didn't respond to it in a good way and is now not talking with you.
That's right. And if I may, Larry, can I just finish my thread? He actually called me an hour ago, and I asked him what was wrong, because we hadn't talked for around about 6 weeks. And he says, Graham, you are overwhelming. And so this is an example of some of the difficulties I have in creating a comfortable space, not only for myself, but for other people. You get all sorts of weird blowback, and I'm learning to cope with that. That's the point.
Yeah, so this is an example of what can happen in trying to share this work out in the world, and you're doing your best to learn from that.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I feel fully heard, Rosa.
Thank you.
Thank
you. So, Sally, would you be willing to be my listener?
Okay.
Okay. So, so I want to take a slightly different tack in this conversation, but it actually connects with what Graham just said.
Okay, so you're going to take a different tact, but it's going to resemble what Graham said.
Yeah, I don't know if resemble, but it'll speak to it a little bit. I'm interested, and this is kind of what I thought this conversation was going to be, but this is totally fine. So, I mean, I should say that this conversation is a little different from what I thought it was going to be, and I'm also enjoying it.
Okay, so the conversation that we've partaken in today was a little different than what you expected, but you're gonna go with it and explain your way of viewing it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been enjoying it, and I guess the thing I want to say is that I'm a process person and I'm a systems person, and so when Graham says what he just shared, I'm sitting here thinking, oh, what kind of system, what kind of process could we have so that Graham could dive really deep into that issue that he had with his friend and actually have longer to explore it than just the turn that he has in this process.
Okay, so you are a process person and not a systematic person. I forgot what that was. And that you're wondering how this issue that confronted Graham could have been altered in the empathy process.
Well, actually, thank you. That's very close. I'm wondering about a family of processes, because Edwin always says that, he sees empathy circle as a gateway to other processes. And I think that there can be a number of different siblings, if you'd like, for different purposes, right? So say somebody has a challenge and they want a supportive empathic context in which to dive deep into that challenge, we might design something that has a lot of empathy elements, but it's slightly different from the empathy circle format as we're doing it now.
Okay, so you have a bigger vision of in the set of processes in what Edwin formulated, and the possibility that there's a family of different processes that could be used for various different dysfunctions that occur by subsets of not knowing how to move ahead.
Awesome, thank you. I feel heard. Do I have another minute, or how's my time?
Good.
20 seconds.
20 seconds. I just want to mention there's this thing that is, it's like a World Cafe. This is not now for Graham specifically, but there's this thing that's like a World Cafe, but it's called a Pro Action Cafe. And there are communities where these are hosted on a regular basis, and people come and support each other on the projects that they are doing. So I'm kind of imagining like a hybrid Pro Action Cafe with Empathy Circle kind of elements to it would be super helpful for helping to develop an empathy movement, because there would be support for a lot of different projects. And that was a mouthful. My apologies.
Okay, kind of a hybrid between the empathy circle movement and this world action movement that has pretty much the same kind of format, to do a hybrid and get them, and to see how we can work to develop more progress.
Thank you. I feel heard, and I really appreciate you listening. I feel like that was the gist of what I was saying. So thank you so much, Sally.
Okay, thank you, Rosa. And I suspect we've got, I don't want to be really tough on Iman. Usually people don't understand me, but are you available to talk?
No, Sally, it's my pleasure to listen to you. I'll do my best.
Okay, so yeah, I have been working with Bill, and it's been kind of something useful for me in a way learning about, well, in what do you call that? His teaching the kids that are really struggling, and all sorts of possibilities could come out of their situation. They could go to prison or whatever.
So what I understand from you, Sally, is that working with Bell was so useful and helpful for you, and that it helped you like to learn more about how he teaches students who are really struggling, and how he finds ways like to help them get out of their struggle. Is it close to what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I said. So I just want to say that today with my husband, I want to do this as a case in point, is my husband woke up, and this is a person who by the end of the day has burned 10,000 calories or more.
Okay, I'm not sure that I got this, but you mean like this could be helpful for you, like dealing with your husband, and that he's having a very different lifestyle from you, that by the end of the day he'll be like burning a lot of calories. Is
Right.
that what you're saying? Okay, yeah.
Yes. And let's just say 10,000 calories. So we woke
10,000.
up,
Okay.
yeah, we woke up at midnight. He hadn't eaten dinner, and then he insisted that he wouldn't eat till the next morning. And so
you mean like he tries to keep to his routines and what he's thinking more priority for him, even if he like didn't have dinner, he insists not eating late at night.
yeah, exactly. So we got up this morning, and he honestly, he was so angry. There was, and with this guy, when he's hungry, he throws some food and run.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure whether it was angry or hungry, but you said that he was so hungry, maybe because he didn't have his dinner late. So he just eats so fast, and then um, maybe you didn't get the chance like to have time with him because he gets to his job or something like this. I don't know if I'm like predicting things, but maybe this is the story in my mind.
Well, that's too nice for him. Yeah. So anyway, so I forgot that once he eats, he restores and he becomes a happy person. So what Bill said is you find out what is wrong with the child and search for the meaning of why the child is violent.
Okay, so you're saying that your husband is able like to change his mood so fast, while once he eat he becomes like more happy again, and you're reflecting on what Bell said, that what could be wrong with a child, and how like to maybe to help correcting this behavior.
And that
Right.
was the time, Sally.
Okay, so it's just the concept of I had a choice to call the sheriff or to de-escalate and feed him. In conclusion,
Okay, maybe I didn't get the joke at the end.
okay, it's fine. It's your turn. And you
Okay.
pick a listener.
I don't know who's
I think
Thank-
Edwin.
I haven't
Edwin?
gone.
Okay.
Do you want to choose?
Okay. So I'll go with Edwin.
Okay, I'm listening.
Wow. I'm just thinking I'm overwhelmed with like so many emotions at the moment. It's so really hard like to keep your mind focused on now and here, you know, and never like to jump into like connecting the dots or filling the gaps. And as an overthinker person like me myself, I have always had this difficulty of just focusing on the present moment and to be all the time present, not thinking in the future or in the past, just in the moment.
Okay, can you
So-
pause there so I can reflect back?
Yeah.
So you're feeling, it sounds like overwhelmed, full of a lot of emotions. You're just saying that you tend to be a thinker, think about things, and it's hard for you to be present in the present moment.
Exactly. And though I'm always this person who really likes to listen to people, still I feel like there are a lot of things I need like to really work on again, to just listen for the sake of listening, not just listening for the sake of helping or supporting or giving advices or whatsoever.
So you like to listen to people, but you feel that you need to get better at just listening to listen, not to advise or to add things to what they're saying.
Yeah, it's very much close. And I think since we're talking about like how to improve our or how to build our empathy movement, I felt really overwhelmed with what Graham really mentioned about his friend and how he had such good intentions towards like maybe feeling better with his company, and maybe because we're not like prone to really actively listen to others and give them the space, it's very hard like to get this intention um, clearly without being or without feeling like offended or something.
So you're seeing the difficulty of sort of like with Graham, building on what Graham said, that in that relationship, it's hard not to offend people when you're trying to create a different way of relating.
Yeah, I feel like the problem of really actively listening to others is that there is something that we can call it an autopilot in our mind, and we just tend to like listen to people with this autopilot. Again, not to be actively listening, but maybe I'm hearing you and I'm preparing in my mind something like to respond to what you're saying, or I'm hearing you and I'm just thinking that, okay, from the very first lines of what you're saying, I already know what you're gonna say afterwards. So that's what really hinder us from actively listening to each other and empathize with what we're saying.
So a block to empathy is that we're sort of on this autopilot. So instead of really listening to people, our autopilot has us thinking about how to respond or to kind of do non-empathic approaches. And you see that as sort of a block, maybe a problem.
Yeah. You know, I've always had this problem with my husband, especially in the very first year of our marriage. So I always told him that I really need you to fully and attentively listen to me, and not like to jump into like maybe finding something to support or something to like respond to me. And afterwards, when we started like to improve our self-awareness of how to listen to each other actively, communication became really very very elevated, and I feel like we really had such this bond or connection in which I'm not really misunderstanding him or vice versa.
Okay, that was the time too, but I'll give you the final
Yeah.
reflection.
Okay.
So at first with your husband, it sounds like he didn't listen to you so well, but then you started doing mutual active listening, and that's really elevated the quality of your connection and with each other.
Yes, exactly. Thank
Okay.
you, Edwin. I feel fully heard,
Great.
and I really appreciate you hearing me and listening to me.
Okay, yeah, hearing your gratitude for being heard. So I'll speak to Rosa then next, if I may.
Yes, I'm right here.
Yeah, the story of Graham, where like his friend doesn't want to listen, right? It's one way listening, and I hear that all the time. It's like, I don't want to be empathic because I listen all the time and nobody listens to me. So that seems to be a major sort of a block or problem out there.
Yeah, so if I may reflect back just that piece, what Graham said is something that you've heard before, and it can actually turn people off to empathy, because people are like, I don't want to be empathic because I have all these friends and I listen to them all the time and they never listen to me, and so you're seeing this as a frequent challenge.
Yeah, and there's something I'm thinking about is an agreement, right? That there's something about creating an agreement. If someone doesn't want to do the agreement, is just you just don't relate to them. It's like we have an agreement in the empathy circle here to do a certain process of mutual listening. And if people don't want to do it, we don't need to, they're not in the circle. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you're realizing the importance of initial agreements to kind of set the parameters. You didn't use that word, but it's like here, when we do empathy circle here, there's a form, there's a structure. And if people don't want to go along with the agreement, then it's kind of a prerequisite for taking part. And so you're thinking that it might be helpful with our personal relationships to have some conversations about agreements as well.
And a cultural agreement, right? Like the Constitution is a cultural agreement. This is the core of our society. So I think we need a constitutional amendment that says it's not just, your life, liberty, or freedom, happiness, your search for happiness. It's like maybe empathy should be one of the, having a constitutional amendment that says, empathy is a core societal value. And then you have that to sort of as a reference, because everything that we have agreements all over that just maybe not spoken or said, but let's have an explicit agreement.
Yeah, so from your political perspective, you're realizing that our Constitution is a cultural agreement. And so you're wondering what it would be like to modify the Constitution in some way, create an amendment to specifically mention empathy.
Yeah, and we could do that as a movement. If the movement we're building up, we'd say we want to we would write up a constitutional amendment and push it in the state legislature and the Congress, and then it becomes kind of an issue, right? It becomes you get attention for it, and just like my campaign running for Congress is to get attention for the empathy movement, right? So if we did a campaign for a constitutional amendment, that would get us attention.
Yeah, a campaign for a constitutional amendment would raise the visibility of empathy, just like you're running for Congress is raising the visibility of the empathy movement.
And I hear, like Ray's talk, a lot of people are talking about, hey, we got to do it. We got to change myself. I think that's part of it. But it's like we have to, maybe we change ourselves to be more empathic, but there is a societal component to it too, right? We need to change the structures, the systems, which you were talking about, and a constitutional amendment or other structures within the social structure, systems need to be changed and could be changed for the movement.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a both and here, that we
Yeah.
need individual change and we also need structural change or systems change or societal component, you said. And one of those, an example of that would be a constitutional amendment.
Yep, feel fully heard. That was my time.
Awesome. Okay, Bill, would you be willing to be my listener?
Love to.
Yeah, I'm just sensing in to see what wants to bubble up.
So you're giving yourself some time.
Yeah. I was, what Edwin said reminded me of how the other day I was talking to people. Buckminster Fuller had this idea that, and he called it something, I don't remember exactly what, but that sometimes we're moving forward in this direction, but the real value comes from this kind of perpendicular movement that's happening. So when Edwin was saying, yeah, he's running for Congress, but he's raising the value or the visibility of the empathy movement, right? It's like he may or may not end up in Congress, but he's going to definitely do this other thing, right? That's a little perpendicular. So I was kind of thinking about that.
So you were talking about Edwin's run for Congress, which, in one sense is a political tract, to gain influence. But also that just by running for Congress, he also has this effect of raising awareness of empathy and the empathy movement. And you referenced Buckminster Fuller, that sometimes when you're going in a straight line, there's this other influence you have sort of in a perpendicular, another angle that has an effect that could be just as important.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I feel fully heard. Yeah. It's not easy, I guess. I just want to say it's not easy necessarily to set up agreements, but I do think it's really important, like with friends and all. I mean, like, I don't know, like, I think it's just like, there's been times when I've said to people, right, like, oh, well, maybe if we take turns and whatever, and sometimes people can get suspicious, like, oh, are you trying to control the conversation? And so I figured out to say, well, what kinds of agreements do you think might help us have a good conversation? Like, for example, this is one, but maybe you have others, right? It's like just being really careful about even proposing the agreement, because like the defensiveness that Valerie was talking about at the beginning, it's like people can get very defensive and suspicious and think that you're trying to control them when you're just trying to introduce something that's going to help both people communicate.
So you're talking about sort of how we're conditioned and how friends are conditioned. And so you talked about the difficulty of setting up some ground rules for communication. And when you suggest anything, it can be people's defense mechanisms can be activated because they think that you're trying to get control, whereas you're just trying to make a suggestion and you'd be open for their suggestions as well. You're just trying to find a common ground, but people are conditioned to be defensive around that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I feel heard. So yeah, so just the part that it's not so simple, I guess. I just want to emphasize again that
Yeah. It's not so simple dealing with those, those agendas that people have and the conditioning that people have.
yeah, and the trauma that people have as well. I mean, I didn't say trauma, but I think, we all have trauma of different kinds and it comes out in different ways. And definitely, and so is the question of places to work out the challenges that we encounter. Like I know that there's a Friday gathering that is designed for people who run into difficulties with setting up an empathy circle. And I'm wondering if that might be a useful place to go and explore that, even if you're trying to set up an empathy circle of 2 with your friend, so it's just a curiosity I was having.
So you're looking at ways to address this sort of conditioned bias. We have also, you mentioned that it can come from trauma as well. It's not just that people are, want to be obstreperous, but that they can have trauma and it's unresolved. And so that can activate their defense mechanisms. And then you were referencing, I believe it was Lou's group on Friday that talk about setting up empathy circles, and where that might be a good place to explore strategies to basically make suggestions and ways to use empathic listening, and also sort of accommodate people's fears and conditioning.
Yeah, not that this isn't, right? Like I'm really glad that Graham brought it up here, but I'm just like thinking, where are additional places where we can explore obstacles?
Right. So not to value the purpose of what we're doing now or the, in any way, but also look and give people alternative tools to achieve that end of communication.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. Valerie.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Sure, good. I think people talked about, how we are conditioned, and also kind of incorporating some of the ideas, the empathy circle practice, and also kind of taking the philosophical core of the empathy circle practice and then trying to employ it in different ways. I guess it's interesting. I'm sorry, that's pretty dense. I apologize for that.
No, that's all right. Thank you. What I heard is that what's gone around is just the sort of the need for empathy, and also the different ways in which we can express that empathy. That's right. In a nutshell.
Yeah. And to me, I've been dealing with it in my own personal philosophical, kind of forum with myself, is the idea of a paradox. I'll stop there.
So you've been thinking about these matters, contemplating them with yourself, just in terms of your own philosophies and how that might sort of how you might work that out within yourself.
Right. And it's seen in science. It's called the reductionist point of view. And what that means is that everything can be reduced to these little units. Okay, think of Lego blocks. And while that has shown some, it's given us a lot of technological advances, what we're finding out through physics and things like that, that also there's this other reality where everything is connected. I'll stop there.
So there's 2 points of view that you were pointing out. One is the reductionist view, and the reductionist view is where everything can be reduced down to very simple form. And then there's another view where we're all connected.
Right. And so I believe that both things exist simultaneously, but we don't have the structure to really incorporate them at the same time. In our conscious minds, we separate them. I'll stop there.
So both of these perspectives, the reductionist and the collective, are important, and the reductionist has a lot of value, but you're not sure about, or you're observing that we haven't really come to how these two can be coexisting
Right.
at the same time and be useful to us enough.
Right. And I think that a lot of our attachments to one view or whatever the other is our emotional blocks, not cognitive blocks. We can understand something cognitively, but we can be very stuck emotionally. And so what I think that the empathy circle does is it starts to slowly untie those emotional knots so that we can start to embrace the paradox, embrace the fact that simultaneously we're individual and unique, and we're also an integral part of a much greater whole.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that what you're saying is that our blocks really aren't cognitive. Essentially, they are emotional. And so our emotional blocks to being able to integrate this paradox of the reductionist and the collective, that those blocks are essentially emotional blocks. And those blocks are keeping us from being able to really see fully how we can integrate both of these at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Bill. I feel like I didn't do a really good job there. I was trying to understand at the same time because it was a lot.
You did fine. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. Sally, would you please be my listener?
Sure. Valerie? Oh, shoot. It's a situation. I have it leaning against my sewing machine. Okay.
But first of all, Sally, I just wanted to say I love you.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been just incredible. Oh, no. First, you want to say that you love me.
Yeah, I love your style. You know, I always enjoy talking with you and interacting with you. And I always like hearing what you have to say. And it puts me into a place of just always remembering the essence of what we're doing here.
So I help to put you in a place where you are remembering what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, because you're so real and you're so honest, and so I think sometimes we just have difficulties around that because we, you know, sometimes are insecure about how someone else is going to react, or how we're going to come across, or are we going to be rejected, and all these things that I feel like there's something about you that you just kind of break through that, and you just are yourself, and I love to observe that.
So you believe that I break a lot of boundaries of what people are expected, and that it doesn't follow the norm.
Mm-hmm. You're just a beautiful light, and I just wanted to share that with you. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is you sort of reminded me of the child within us, and how that child gets injured so easily, and how if we observe each other as these injured children, that perhaps there's something in there that we can not want to destroy or try to harm, but try to understand and try to just bring love and nurturing to that situation.
Okay, so you discussed that I reminded you of the inner child and that it's something that maybe we don't look at or treat as it is as fragile, and that it needs to be looked at differently.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the thing we overlook inside ourselves, the child. We overlook it in someone else when we're little and we're children and we're playing with each other. You know, we don't have this sort of highly cognized way or conditioned way of interacting with each other. But as we get older, I think it's because we're always told, you know, how to behave, that when we're interacting with others, we put that onto them. Like, you're such and such age now, you're an adult now, you're supposed to act like this, you're supposed to act like that. And we end up sort of like parenting each other in a way that is not loving and is not nurturing. We no longer honor the child in us, and then we no longer honor the child within the other person.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I just got a call, but I put it to voicemail. So as far as the inner child, I lost you, Valerie, but I'm not sure what happened.
Okay.
The inner child, yeah, we lose that at a very young age, and we get forced into conformity, and that it's there's a progress that makes us so that, well, this whole emotional part of our person is lost. It's just something unhealthy.
Yeah, that's the person. Thanks, Larry. I'll just finish my sentence, I guess. It's that inner child within us that I think we all want to hang on to, and because it's been sort of not destroyed, but rejected within ourselves, we end up rejecting that innocence in the other person, and we almost resent it when someone is vulnerable. And because we want to be vulnerable and we feel like we can't be vulnerable, and if the other person is vulnerable, we kind of resent it. And anyways, I just want to end by saying thank you for your light, Sally. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, what I understand is that we are fighting our inner child in ourselves and from the other person fighting us. And that may be the crux of the issue with empathy, not being able to grasp empathy in a larger group than what we're working with.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, Iman, is that okay?
Yes, Sally, I'm hearing you.
Okay, I hope I'm not too. Sometimes I run on. Okay, so the inner child gets lost, and what I'd have to say that it's innate in more the indigenous people, and I'll stop there.
You're saying that the inner child like gets lost, and you really don't like this, or I'm not sure that I understood
Okay.
the last part.
So what I'm saying is that the inner child in society, our white society, does get lost, but in indigenous tribes, Native Americans,
Yes.
this nature part of our human self does not get lost, as I understand it.
Mhm. So you think maybe in the tribes where maybe the norms or the culture is so different that what we have in our contemporary societies, maybe they save the inner child in themselves better than us because we're having so many like distractions, and that's maybe what leads to getting our inner child lost eventually.
Right. And it's like we extract our inner child as in our white society.
Mm-hmm. You're saying that in our white society we are really extracting our inner child and we're working or we're doing something like intentionally to lead to this child loss.
Yeah, so we're working against ourselves.
And you think that this is really not helping us, it's something that is really against our sakes in a way or another.
So to get to the crux of what we do, I leave it as something to contemplate, that we as people need to step back and find our way back to the inner child and safety in a new communication system, which I think culture empathy does exactly.
So you're thinking instead of contemplating on this, we really need like to step back and take proactions towards like getting this inner child back from its loss, and this is gonna help our communication in the society.
Yeah, and I think that the culture of empathy does that with
Yes, and you're valuing the culture empathy and thinking that this is really helping towards achieving this goal.
And that was the time, Sally, just Larry had held it up.
Okay.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
I need to say I love you, Sally, too. It's only one time I met you, but I love you so much.
So it's your
Okay.
turn, select your listener, Eman.
Yeah, I guess this time, if Graham is willing to listen to me, I'll pick you up.
For sure. Thank you very much, Iman.
Okay. So, wow. Actually, this inner child thing is really so deep, you know. I have always had this fear in myself that I don't really want it to grow up till I came to a day that I stand in front of the mirror and look to myself and see somebody that I'm not familiar with. So.
And so, Iman, you're finding the subject of the inner child really very deep. and you didn't. This is a child that you didn't really want to grow up until one day you stood in front of a mirror, and then you thought, "Hey, something's got to change."
Yes, exactly. You know, what was Sally saying and Larry before is really so so touching, and just gets me back on track of what I'm really doing right now and what I was thinking of myself while I was a child and dreaming of. And it's really something that is different to cope with, because once we get into this life and we find ourselves in a family with parents who really wanted to like teach us the discipline, and then we go to school and then we get discipline, other kind of discipline with our teachers, and then you feel like you're lost. This free child in yourself is not there anymore, because you were trying like to feel loved, to feel belonging. So you're trying just like to cope with what really people like you to say or to do.
And so, Iman, you're saying that as a child, and you identify your inner child with all the processes that you went through, the stages you went through as a child, and you think about the disciplines and constraints that your parents put on you, and then the disciplines and constraints that teachers put on you, and all sorts of other pressures from society. And I think you feel sad that that inner child is getting very confused and oppressed and a little bit sidelined.
Yeah, exactly. I've always had this fear in my mind that if one day I decided to be a mother and I'll just be responsible for a soul that comes through me, but I don't really own it. It's a different identity, but it just came through me. So how we're gonna survive together? How I'm gonna really get this child uh, into being his or her own self, and at the same time, how like to teach this child or to nurture him or her, like to do I don't know, I don't even know whether we should say rights and wrongs and this kind of stuff, but you know, I'm a bit overwhelmed.
And so, Iman, you're thinking about this inner child in terms of a child which you may one day have, and you used the words like coming through you into the world, and you feel anxious and seriously challenged at the prospect of helping to bring up a child, and realizing that this child is very different from you, or likely to be very different from you. Yet how do you nurture that child? How do you help that child not only to live within some of the uglinesses of society, but still realize its own potential? And this is an enormous challenge for you, but I think you're looking forward to it.
That was the time, just to. Yeah.
Thank you, Bram. I feel really, I'm fully heard. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Iman. Larry, would you be so kind to be my listener?
Yes, Graham.
Thank you. I think about one set of words you used, and I'm not sure that I'm actually remembering them correctly or well, but you talked about and you didn't use the word authentic, but essentially being coming from an authentic space, coming from a real space. And that's kind of what I'd like to talk about.
So Graham, I'm hearing you say that you're thinking of the words that I was using, but it wasn't exactly authentic, but that was the essence of it, and that's what you'd like to talk about.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that this thing about promoting, bringing empathy to the world, let me try to think what the thing is. How might we build an empathy movement? I'm thinking that to try to change the world, and I talked about asking one guy to change his behavior, and I didn't use those words, but anyway, it doesn't fly somehow. And also, so I'll just stop there.
So Graham, I hear you saying you're thinking about this idea of bringing a culture of empathy into the world, how to share and spread that, how to bring that about. And you're thinking about the idea of changing the world. And you mentioned an example of that. You have this one guy that you tried to change his behavior, but that's not what you really meant. I think you said something like that. So you're thinking about this idea of changing the world, but maybe it's not changing the world. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
And thank you, Larry. And the other idea is creating a framework of rules. And Rosa talked about it, and Edwin talked about it. And if you are talking about a framework of rules to do with the empathic process, and people don't understand what the empathic process is, then talking about a framework of rules is a non-starter.
So Graham, I hear you saying that when we're talking about empathy, if people don't have an awareness or an authentic experience of what empathy is and living that empathy, then when you start making rules, I guess rules that sound like they're keeping people in the boundary of being empathic, there's going to be confusion.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, sure. Anyway, the bottom line of my little idea is that I need to be confident about what I'm doing, the path I'm taking, and I need to be as empathic as I can, listen as effectively as I can, and even though I'm going to be in a minority, nonetheless, to do that and to do it faithfully, and time will deliver.
So Graham, I hear you saying that when it comes to this practice, you need to be confident in what you're doing and saying, and you need to practice empathy. You need to be empathic yourself. And then I think you said time will deliver.
Yeah, and so that's good timing. And I thank you very much indeed, Larry.
Thank you, Graham. How are we doing on time, by the way? Do we have time for?
Yeah, we have another one or two.
All right.
Go ahead, maybe two more.
I'll refresh the 4-minute timer. And Imman, could I speak to you, please?
Yeah, sure, Larry.
Thank you, Imman. Yeah, I'm really nurtured by our collective conversation today on humanity, I guess.
So you're saying that you really nurtured by our conversation today and how it's going on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You use the word collective.
Yeah, our collective conversation is nurturing when there's I think of a safe space where people just know that their thought will be reflected so they can have a clearing for what comes up next.
And you think that this really happens when people, they feel like they are safe spaces, um, and we're thinking of maybe what should come next or what's going on next.
Yeah. And it's actually in the not knowing what's going to come up next where the beauty is. When we say what's on our mind, what's alive in us, and that's cleared out, the what's next is kind of unknown.
And you're saying that when we say what's in our mind, it becomes clear that we really understand that what is coming next is unknown and we're not controlling it.
That's it. That next thought is the thought we haven't thought yet. And it kind of comes into birth, you might say. It kind of comes into this safe cradle of the cradle of civilization that we are creating in the safety of the protection of everyone.
And you're saying that maybe only then we think that our next thoughts that we thinking of, we didn't think of them yet, and or they are yet to come, and we don't know what our next thoughts are going to be, and that the cradle of civilization would really help us, like, to be more coping with this thought.
Yes, as we clear our mind kind of old dead wood, then there's this new green life energy that reveals itself of itself.
I'm not sure that I got this thought, Larry, so would you please again mention it to me?
Yeah, as we clear our mind of old dead wood thoughts, then there's space for new greenery to blossom.
Okay, yeah. And you're saying that when we really give the space in our mindsets and we clear our minds of these worries about the future and the next coming thoughts, we just like given the space for greenery and flowers, like to nurture and to come into our minds in a better way, like better ideas to come in our minds.
Yes, we just need to trust and let it happen. Thank you, Iman. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
And you're valuing the concept of just like trusting in what's coming next and in the future, and just accepting what is gonna happen. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, if you want to take the last one now, you can select someone and it'll be the last one before we debrief.
Okay. So I guess I'll move to Rose.
Yes, it's Rosa.
Rosa, I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm just trying like to wrap up all the thoughts and ideas that I really collected from every one of you. It's really so elevating, and I feel like my spirits are uplifted after this 2-hour session.
Yeah, you're feeling a lot of uplift from participating in this session, and you're kind of collecting and harvesting these various thoughts that you've gathered?
Exactly. I guess in order like to really give the movement of empathy like a space in our world in which everyone is really connected barely with him or herself. And I'm not quite sure that with the rise of technology, we're not given the chance like to think about ourselves on a daily basis. So I was thinking that really, as I guess maybe Graham said, is just to start with a personal responsibility, or to start on an individual level with my own self, and is really a good step forward for the movement.
You're feeling inspired about the possibility of starting with your own self.
Exactly. And I'm thinking that also Edwin mentioned that even if I was like able to maybe to work on my own listening skills and my my empathy skills, still maybe I'll feel like I'm I'm I'm, I'm lifted behind by other people, because again, why do I do this while I'm not having in my circle, and especially in my close circle, like people who are doing the same with me?
So there's a concern about how to do this when you don't have people yet who are doing this with you.
Yeah, and I'm reflecting on also the example that you gave, because actually I can relate so much to that. That when you try like to find a way with your friends or the people around you of like how to really let's say to have this good company with each other, and like how to practice conversation and listening to each other in a good way, in which each one of us really fully heard and fully seen. You always are accused of being like playing the controller role, or this kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, so you related to what was said earlier, that sometimes when people take initiative and say, hey, let's play this particular game that has these particular rules or these particular agreements, sometimes people feel others receive it as an attempt at control.
Yeah, exactly. I think again, it's as Larry told me, that maybe I don't really uh, I don't know, I took it to myself as if he really was speaking to me, and I related to this so much, so I'll just try to like absorb it, digest it, and work for it. And I'll just keep just thinking of myself and of the present moment of how I can really uplift my skills and upgrade my skills in empathy and in active listening. And I won't really care too much about what comes next, because what comes next is eventually gonna come, and I just have to accept it. So I'll take, I don't know if it was an advice or he just was speaking of his mind, but I'll take it as an advice and I'll work with it.
Yeah, you were inspired by hearing this idea that you can just focus on upgrading your own skills in empathy and active listening, and that the next step will emerge. You don't need to know ahead of time what it's going to be.
Yes, exactly, Rosa. Thank you so much. I feel like I fully heard, and I appreciate you really spending time listening to me.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, so I want to slowly wrap up, have a little bit of a debrief. So let me just post a question here So we just go around and for 30 seconds to a minute, just share what are you going to be working on to build the empathy movement, sort of a takeaway. I was hearing Iman sort of already starting with that, which is maybe working on a personal level, but we'll just go around if everyone would like to share. And since you were the listener, Rosa, do you want to start?
So I think that connecting networks with each other is a really good way to support the emergence of social change. And there's a network I'm a part of called Bright Future Now, and I've introduced reflecting back to them before. So I'm thinking I might put a post on there saying, hey, some of you really like this. Why don't you go over to the Empathy Circle calendar if you ever want to participate in any more of it. So kind of trying to link up those two networks a little bit.
Thanks. Larry?
Yeah, I love the empathy circles and sharing them, participating in them, going to empathy cafes, participating as facilitator. I love all of it. And today's conversation, I just love the things that come out, that come forward to me, that as we clear out the dead wood of whatever is on our mind, it creates a new space for something green to be alive. And as we're sharing, I'm occurring, this only works if you're speaking what's true for you. It only works if you're speaking the truth. And so what came to me was a poet, I don't remember the name, said, if I could leave you with 3 words, they would be this: tell the truth. And if I could just have 3 more words, they would be all the time. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't quite hear what you were going to do. Is that you're going to tell the truth all the time? Is what kind of the
I started with that. I'm sharing empathy circles, online. I go to the empathy cafes. I'm a facilitator, and also sharing it on Meetup in PTSD groups. So I love the empathy circle. I'm going to keep on keeping on and telling the truth.
There you go. Okay, that's the green shoots of truth. Thank you, Larry. Graham?
So I'm really captivated by the idea of linking networks, like Rosa's talking about. But I don't come from that world, so I've got so much anxiety that stops me actually going and exploring these things. But what I'm slowly finding is that if I have the intention of providing empathic spaces, if I have the intention of providing safe spaces, and I'm actually able to do so, then other people will invite me to help this cross-fertilization between networks. And this is happening in a couple of instances, very, very tentative, but nonetheless it's happening. And it's never happened before. So it's a new world for me, Rosa. But I do like it. But I still need to go back to the idea of, Graham, look after your intentions and your practice, and everything else will follow. Like a green shoots, you nurture your green shoots and things will happen. And so thank you. I've enjoyed today and I really appreciated it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, in terms of those, what I was hearing is it's about that networking. And for example, the Talk with the Cops event that we did, we had 70 people from around the country, police and so forth. And that was exactly that, working with this other network of the, so I think that's very powerful. Yeah, if we can connect with those networks. Bill?
Well, I really enjoyed today's comments and really appreciated everybody sharing their journeys. And I'm working on empathy in schools, breaking it down so that it can be digestible to kids with shorter attention spans, and trying to integrate it for teachers who don't necessarily have a lot of time in the day. And but once the skills are internalized, I really do believe in the transformational, power of this. Thanks.
And you're also producing the training, which is on Mondays too.
Right.
So I just want
Well,
to let
I'm
everyone know
also
that too.
part of the group that's doing the training. Yes, and I'm very proud to be part of that too.
Yeah, Valerie.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. I really appreciated everyone sharing. I think it in part really enables me to just be more empathic in a world where I know there are so many people who embody this in their true nature. And so I carry that forth in how I move through the world. And so I'm going to continue doing that and continue just contemplating on the different things that are true for me, and also embracing more my own inner child, which I think I do for the most part, but I know that I have insecurities when I feel like any kind of hostility from other people, and that ends up sort of diminishing my light a little bit, but it's not because of anything they're doing, it's because I'm allowing it to happen. And I think that's part of really embracing empathy, is allowing my own light to shine, and recognizing that only when I do that can I actually allow other people to feel comfortable enough around me that their own light will shine. So I think my own sort of trepidation is causing a lack of empathy as much as I could extend it. And I think I learned a lot about that in today's circle. And so I will, just.
Your connection dropped. We lost that last sentence, Valerie.
Bounced out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sally?
Okay, I think Larry connected the dots with what I think that we've lost from the indigenous and Native American tribes is to learn to speak the truth all the time. And so as far as this concept of getting different groups together to cross mingle, I look at the 100th monkey and I go, okay, how did it happen? The 100th monkey, you've got the one monkey that learns to wash the sweet potato, then another learns, then it just starts to spread. So I'm wondering, in kind of a hypothesis, if the spreading of the cross mingling could be learned to tell the truth. And I'm just leaving it there.
Okay, thanks, Sally. E-Man?
Okay, so I really appreciate being with you today, and I want to thank each one of you because I really learned a lot of everyone here. And for me, maybe I'll just go with my personal responsibility, and I'll work on my own self, and then I'll try to extend this to at least my close circle. And I'm so much, I so much believe in the ripple effect, which is, I don't have like to change the world, but if I was like able to start with myself and take the initiative to this, maybe something is gonna happen. Maybe if even one person is really affected by what I'm doing, this is considered a gain. So I do much believe that maybe we're not gonna live in one day in an empathetic world in which each one of us is really actively listening to the other, but at least we can like improve the future of ourselves and of the next um, generations if we're really don't give up on the case and take the initiative to this. Maybe the butterfly effect is gonna like be there. That's it.
Okay, thanks for that. So for me, it's I just keep holding these empathy circles and see it as a space, actually, as Larry is saying, for new shoots to arrive, to grow up. You can't, like, if there's a plant, you can't like really force it, to grow. You just keep giving it the sunlight, you give it the water, you give it the nutrients. And I think that's what the empathy circle is. It's like a little, it's a pot that has good fertilizer, and the ideas will slowly grow, but you got to keep being present. So I think, keep holding these circles. We have a lot of different projects too that have kind of grown, kind of bigger. The training is out there, is growing. You can join the training. In an hour, we have the Interfaith Empathy Cafe. So if you want to come to that, you're welcome to come to that. We have the campaign. If you're interested in the campaign, that's sort of growing. So there's all these different, things that grow, but I think they grow out of this space, this empathic space, so that the means are the end. So, and then with that, there are things that you can do to kind of help out, though. Let me put this link in here. The first one is to help invite friends to here, you can spread the word, kind of, maybe it's metaphorically, it's sending out seeds, right? To kind of help spread and invite others into the circle. And I'm going to show in a minute how to invite people on LinkedIn, which is one of the best ways to get the word out. There's a feedback form there too, that you can, make any comments. And then there's a calendar of upcoming cafes. We have, next week we'll be here as well. And Larry has one on Friday, and Bill has one on another one, a couple things that he's doing with the training, as well as, we just lost Bill. Oh, he has to go. So, and yeah, he has a buddy call to do. So anyway, those are some links if you want to copy that. And before we close, you want to take a second to, if you can click on the that LinkedIn event. If you're on LinkedIn and you go to that link, that's the Build the Empathy Movement. This is the event. If you go in and say going, say going, and then go in and invite, you can invite your friends, and you can invite 1,000 friends a week, and it just sort of pings them on LinkedIn. And the way, what you can do is you select something like the United States, and then, show results. And I've already invited all these people, but you scroll down, way down to the bottom, and then you have to scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you just click this button here to invite, and it'll select everyone, until you reach the bottom, and then you just send invite here. It's like invite 11. It just invited 11 people, you can see. So that just invites people to the event, and it's one of the best ways to get the word out, to people. So if you'd be willing to do that, would really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, when I go on to that, it says page not found. So I'm
Uh-huh.
just wondering, maybe it's because I'm not on your LinkedIn. Did you want to add me to your LinkedIn, and maybe I can
Oh, if you click there,
access it?
are you able to, I just put a new link in there, does that bring it up?
It just says page not found.
Is
For me.
anyone else having that problem? If you clicked on
Wanna
that
add-
link,
Did you want to add me to LinkedIn? Maybe that might help.
or do you have a LinkedIn account?
I think
For
so.
me, the link is working. I have no problem with it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's working for me as well, but it may, if you add Valerie as a friend, it might help. And you might want to also check and make sure that you have a LinkedIn account.
You
Yeah.
probably- but just make sure you're logged in and then it'll work.
So Edwin, I do have a question.
yeah.
That link that goes to the LinkedIn event, that Build the Empathy Movement is this, right?
This
It's-
is this event. You're inviting people to this event.
it is,
Uh-huh.
Right. And so my question was, you're saying invite 1,000 people a week, assuming more people do come, what is your plan? Because I thought I heard you say earlier you were closing the door so that more people didn't come after a certain time.
Oh, well, this will invite them for the next one. Like
Right.
we locked the door, we locked the room at about 15 or 20 minutes after,
Okay.
so people can't join late because it's very disruptive. But if they come on time, any number of people, like we're 8 people, we could have done 2 rooms. You know, it's sometimes
Oh.
it's
So
sometimes.
you'll have people, you'll do breakout groups.
Yeah,
So-
everybody here could facilitate, you know, everyone, you know, Graham, Larry, Sally Valerie are all facilitators. We would have broken into,
Great.
you know, different rooms.
Awesome.
But it's a great way. I don't know if you've used it before, but it's like just with one button, you know, a couple, you know, you just invite a lot of friends. You see 200 and 300 people have said they're attending, but only a small portion actually attend. But it's a good way to sort of spread the word. And at least they're aware of it and it's on people's mind, and just kind of periodically remind them. Yeah. So, okay, well, that's it. If you're able to see us in an hour, we'll be here. And thanks, everyone. Until then.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you all. So
Bye-bye
glad you
all.
could join us, Iman.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make it to the
Thank you all.
interface as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, thank you all for letting me end with you. I really had a great time.
Oh, great. It was a pleasure to have you.
Nice to meet you, Iman.
Bye,
Nice to
everybody.
meet you all.
Look forward to seeing
Bye.
you again.